Okay. Oh, great, we've got somebody here. Hey, please, use the chat. What would you like me to cover today? Because I've had a couple of requests. Oh, and also, please let me know whether you can hear me. I have no idea whether you can actually hear me or not. So if you wouldn't mind, love you to use the live chat. Tell me what you can see. Tell me what you would like me to cover. Today, I thought it would be really fun to cover what you can see on the screen at the moment. This is what's known as a graphic legend. And if you've never used these before, they're fantastic for finding things like all the windows. For example, this at the moment is just showing how you can find all the windows for the upper floor, and I've actually made it separate, so from the upper floor and the lower floor. So if you want to see me cover that, that's fantastic. Please leave a chat, let me know whether that's the sort of thing you want to cover. The other thing that someone's asked me to cover is trying to create a marionette object like this network here, where when you run it, it creates an object like this. Looks like there's an error in that particular one, but let's have a look. So there it is there, and you can see it actually creates a specific object like that. And the problem I've got is I think I've got a problem with the texture in the middle there. But I can go through that and show you how you can create your own objects if that's the sort of thing that you'd love to do. So please drop a chat, let me know. Oh, the chat's disabled. How do I enable chat? Hold on. Menu, select stream. I thought chat was enabled. I might have to stop this and start again to enable the chat. I'm just trying to have a play with it at the moment. Well, that's weird. Excellent. I've got 4 viewers. Look, I'm really sorry. I apologize for this. I just don't understand how I can start the chat. The last time it just went all on its own. It was really fantastic. But this time it seems to be giving me a problem. Yeah, last time it just worked. I got it going and it just worked. I don't understand what I've done wrong. Look, sorry, I really apologize. I'm just going to have to get going, and we'll just see if I can figure out how to get the chat going in a minute. Which is really disappointing, because I'd love to show you how I can. I'd love to hear from you and get it going. So this is what I've got at the moment. I've got this project and I've got these windows and doors, and what I'd really like is I'd like to have Vectorworks to give me the live windows and doors, which I've done on here. So I'm going to go through this step by step and show you how I managed to do that. Now the first thing is that when I create these windows and door objects, I've got to tell Vectorworks that the windows and doors are to be counted. So let me show you how I've done that to start with. So I'm going to go to floor 2. There's all my windows and doors, and you can see they've all got the window and door IDs on them. So when I select this window, part of the settings, just here, and I'm just going to hide all my things that I don't want, the style parameters. So here I've got the ID tag, and I've got the ID tag in there. If I go back to unhide that, let's have a look. Now we come down and we find that the ID tag is here. We really want to know whether this is showing, whether this is on the schedule or not. So when we edit this window, so let's go back to here. This is the window style here. Let's edit the style. And let's have a look. So here I've got on schedule, but on schedule is actually fixed by my style. So that means that I'm prevented from this window accidentally being off the schedule or on the schedule, and it means that every time I use this window it will automatically be included on the schedule. So I'm going to turn that off so that now we can see it for each individual window. Now I've made all of these windows the same just to make it easy for me when I was drawing this. But if we come down to the ID tag, you can see here include on schedule is listed there, and it means that that window has to be ticked on. Otherwise, when I do my graphic legend, it won't be visible. So I'm just going to turn that off. So I'm just going to turn that back on again. So that means that I can now start to find that particular window. Now the graphic legend is this tool here. It can only be applied or only be used on a sheet layer. So if we scroll down to the sheet layers, I've got one set up for this already. Number 700, it's my window elevations, there they are. I'm going to delete that graphic legend. Now just before I delete it, the graphic legend is using a style. The style here, window types legend, which means that every time I use this, it's going to be the same as the style. Now that's an advantage because I can then save this graphic legend as a style, stick it in my library, and then when I go to grab a graphic legend, instead of using the standard Vectorworks one, I might want to grab my specific one because it's a lot easier for me to go and get that. So let's have a look at how we made it. So delete it, go to the graphic legends button, let's choose our graphic legend that we want. Now Vectorworks comes with a whole bunch of graphic legends already, but they might have settings that you're not keen on or that you don't want. But you can see there's a whole lot. And I usually start with one of these because it's done so much of the work for me. It makes it easier for me to edit this because I've got it going. So let's select that one. I'm going to replace the symbol definition in the current record. So I'm going to throw away all the changes I've made to the last one. Click OK. Now when I go and click and drag from one corner to the other, Vectorworks will use that area or that size to calculate my legend. And this is what it's done so far. Now this has actually got some of the things I want, but some of the things haven't changed. So first of all, my windows are all back to front, so I do need to make a change to that. I've also got the ID on all of them. There's no point having an ID here and an ID there. It's just, there's no reason for that. So let's go back and we're going to start looking through this. So first of all, I explained that you need to make sure that every window has got the on schedule ticked, otherwise they won't show up here. So let's edit the style and we'll edit our define legend source. Now this I've already been through, and it's this part here, defined custom source. This is why I told you that you need to have on schedule is true, because it looks for a window. So the type is a window, on schedule is true, and you can also add other things. For example, you could say that the layer is, and let's go up here. Let's say, for example, I want to find the things on the lower floor. So I just want floor 1. So it's just going to look for objects on floor 1. And if we have a look down here, it's found 10 windows. So I'm not going to look in symbols, not look in plug-in objects, just on my floor plan, and I want to see how many windows are in that file, on that story. Okay. So now I can report them. I can use their symbol name, their style, or their symbol name, but I can also change that to make it something else. For example, I could make it sort by its ID. So if we come down here and we go to its ID label, it's now going to be reported by its ID label. It's going to sort by, again, the ID label. You don't have to change this because if I just left it alone, you'd see it does a pretty good job already. But I just wanted to show you how you can make these changes. And ascending. So ascending starts with number 1 and it goes up to number 12 or number 10. So let's go OK. And let's go OK and see if that's made a change. Okay, so it's recalculated and it looks the same to me, but it was good to recalculate it. Okay, so now let's go back and we'll edit the style again. Now I want to define the legend image. So that's the look of this window. Now I know that these opening indicators are on the outside because that's the way I created them. So let's have a look at defining our legend image. So there it is there. My ID's back to front. I actually don't want my ID. But let's have a look to see what we can do. We've got a hybrid object. We can turn off classes so we can find the ID there. And I want to turn all of those off. So it's Alt key and turn them all off together. Okay. So that gets rid of that ID. So the detail is high. The view is front. I'm going to use hidden line rendering. And you notice it changed slightly, that got a heavier line around the outside. The foreground rendering none. Windows and doors appear closed. I've got my scale, which is about, what's that, 1/4 inch, which is about 1:50. And now I want to look at the alignment. The align image vertical is the floor. Cool, so that should be the floor. Okay, annotations. So what do we want? Do we just want the frame? So here we've got windows and doors. Do we want just the frame? Or do we want the frame and the sill? Or do we want the overall? I mean, these are your choices. Do we want the leaf and the sash? This is, I'm still just doing the vertical dimension. So what I had before, I think, was the rough opening, frame plus rough opening, and I'm just not that happy. What I'd like to have is that to the head. So I think there's one here, structural opening, head to floor. That's what I want. So I've got the overall rough opening, plus I've got the height to the head. Now the horizontal. We want the overall... I want the structural opening, the leaf sash plus the rough opening. Now, if that's too many, then we need to look for something that's more suitable for us. Frame plus structural opening, maybe leaf sash, and I'd like leaf sash plus structural opening. Let's do that one. So I've now got the overall frame plus I've got my sash and my opening. Now, it actually turns out the way I create these windows, that my frame size and my rough opening size are identical, and I've done that for a long time just to reduce my mathematics. So those are your choices that you've got, and we're using the hybrid object display. So that controls what I'm seeing on here, so we should see a change in what we see here graphically. The legend classes, let's look for ID again, make sure they're all turned off good. Now, I might have to come back and turn off something else. I don't know. We'll have a look. I had to practice with this, and I just had to turn off some of those other things. Okay, so fixed cell width means that all cells are the same width. Fixed cell height means that all the heights are the same height. Okay, let's look at cell layout. And let's OK first. Let's just see what we got first. Okay, so now you can see even though I thought I'd turn off all my IDs, they're still there. So let's go down to here and let's make sure we've defined our legend classes here. Let's look for ID. And they're all still turned on. Now I suspect that that's got to do with my style here. Let's edit my style. Here, I've got this to be flexible. What I should have done was to change that to non-flexible. ID. Okay, so I should have changed this one here and made it fixed by style rather than by instance, and that would have changed that. So I've got this pretty well. I've got what I want underway, and let's have a look. So what other things do we want to report? If I go back to my floor 1, I should really use floor 1 rather than floor 2 for this. Let's go back to floor 1, and let's turn off my clip cube. There we are. So if I select one of these windows here, this window, and let's have a look. So that's window 1 again. You can see it's the same as it was. Let's go to my settings. So here I've got, and sorry, I should start again. So what Vectorworks gives you is all of these additional data areas that you can fill in. So you can fill in the manufacturer, the model, and so on. But here under the user field, I've got here a lintel size. So I've used the first user field for my lintel. Now because I've got the curvy arrow, it means I can't change that. It's not flexible, it's fixed by the style rather than by the instance. So I need to go back to edit my style. Let's have a look at my data and we'll make that one flexible. Now that I've made it flexible, I can now start to put in here exactly what the lintel is for each window. So this window isn't a high span window, this one is a 200mm, let's make it 8-inch. So since this is imperial, so this is an 8-inch block lintel or concrete lintel. Block lintel. So I can put that information onto that particular window. This other one, this is also block. So all of the downstairs windows should actually have block work. But when we get upstairs and we look at the settings for a window on the upper floor, you can see we've got a timber or a lumber lintel. So I can put in high spans up there, I can do my calculations, and I can calculate what size lintel I should have for each window. Now why do I want to do that? Well, the reason is that when I get back to my graphic legend here, I would like my graphic legend to actually include what this window is all about and what its lintel is. Now it's much easier for the construction if I put in here the lintel and the size, or size of the lintel plus the fixing. But I'm just going to show you how you can put that lintel in. So let's go and edit my, I want to edit my, no, I want to edit my source, I want to edit my cell layout. Now the cell layout's fixed by my graphic, by my style, so let's edit the style, let's edit the cell layout. So there is my window object, and this is the automatic text that finds the window number and puts it into there. I'm going to copy that down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that. So this is, let's have a look. So both of these are center justified. Okay. This one here is automatic text. I'm going to change its size to 10 point. And we're going to have down the bottom here, we've got the ability to define the graphic legend field. So this is what this little block of text, it's going to look for this information. So we're going to choose, we've got show multiple values, and up here we want this to be, so this is my window field. So we're looking for an object, object parameters. The object type is my window because it's a window object. Now the parameter that it's looking for. Now the parameter that I want to use is user field number 1. It's right down near the bottom. User field number 1, and it should be my lintel. And we go, okay. Made a mistake here. I forgot to replace my current definition. That's better. It's so good that Vectorworks have put that warning in. I so often forget to do that. So let's go OK, and that should now be my lintel size. Let's exit our graphic legend layout, and you can see now I've got my window number and I've got my lintel size. So that's not bad. So let's have a look up here. Let's change that again. Let's edit my style, and we're going to edit the cell layout. I'm going to select both these bits of text. I'm going to change both of these to align left so that the text grows that way. So what if we had some other bit of text here? So I'm just going to copy this bit of text here. No, didn't copy. Let's grab it that way. So I'll hold down the control key to make that copy. Select both of those. We're going to align, and we want to align their centers, which is their middle. Cool. This text here is still looking for my lintel. So I'm going to change that to no dynamic text. I'm going to call this my window ID. Cool. That should be my text. And get rid of that window ID. So that's sort of too large really, but we'll leave it there. And this is going to, we're going to leave that there, and I'm going to drag a copy of that down, and this is going to be my lintel. So those two should line up. If they don't, I'm just going to select them both. Where's my selection tool? So select both of those, right click, and align left. Cool. So those two there should then grow out of that. Alright, let's see what that looks like on the screen. So that's not so bad. I've got those and got that. It's not starting as far over as I wanted, but at least I've got some characters here and I'm starting to get part of what I want. So I think that's okay to start with, to get that underway. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the name of this. We're going to edit the style up here. This is the window legend floor 1. Cool. So I'm just going to make a copy of the style down here, and I'm going to go to my resource manager. Now the window legends appear, which file am I in at the moment? Lesson 1, Jonathan. Cool. So my graphic legends is a style, but it's also, its resources considered to be a symbol and plugin object. And you can see there's lots of them in here already. So is there a way I can do this quickly? Right click, locate, recalculate, locate plugin style in resource manager. And this is a quick way. If you don't know what your object is and you don't know what it's called, this is a quick way of finding it. There it is there, and it's in my graphic style legends. Okay. Now I've only got one in here at the moment, so I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to call it floor 2. Luckily, because I used a number, it's automatically done. Let's right click and we'll edit that. And here we're going to define the source, and the custom source is floor 2. So I'm just going to grab the floor 2. So now I've got one that looks for windows in floor 1, one that looks for windows in floor 2. Everything else is the same. So all my other settings are identical. So that means I can grab this one here. I can go to my style. I can replace that with this file here, floor 2, select, and OK. It's recalculating, and those are all my windows on the upper floor. So I've got my lower floor window and I've got my upper floor windows. And this is very handy. Now at the moment it's looking for all windows, and it might even be looking for windows that are in demolished walls. So I do need to go back and check to make sure that's not doing it. So let's go back to floor 2. I'm just going to turn off everything else. Floor 2. Now I use that quick trick a lot. The Alt plus click on the column and it'll turn off the visibility things. And let's have a look here. So it's this window here that I'm particularly worried about. Let's have a look here. That's a wall. And what's that window? So is that window on schedule? No, so that's not included in my window counting. That window is, that window's on schedule. Cool. Those ones are. So I'm just checking to make sure that any windows that were on my demolished walls are not counted. But there are a lot of windows in this plan, so that looks about right. Let's go back to that. And there's our two schedules, and we've got some information. I just wanted to show you how easy it was, once you've got all your windows and doors, how easy it is to create this graphic legend and how you can grab additional information from those. If you wanted to, you could have the type of window style, you can use extra data fields, and you can put that information and have it all appear here on your window schedule. So I think that covers the graphic legend. Now, where's my graphic legend? I do have some notes that I got ready for today. Graphic legends, here we are. So this is what I was going through. You couldn't see it was off my screen, but this is what I've written. This is available on my website, and it goes through all of the graphic legends settings, how to get it all the way you want, and how to set it all up. So that's a little manual that I wrote 2023. So I wrote that a couple of years ago. That's one of the things on my website. The other thing I wanted to show you is today, when Marionette came out, I wrote this little manual on creating objects. And it goes through the basic strategy of what Marionette is. So that's the thing that we're going to cover first, is looking at what is Marionette. So the basic concept of Marionette is that it has a series of so Marionette has this ability to have what they call nodes and wires. Now the idea between a node and a wire is that a node tells Vectorworks to do something. And well, let's have a look. Can I make this bigger? Let's zoom in. So here's what this is the way I've explained it. So a node tells Marionette to do something. And so after telling Marionette to do something, you can tell it to do something else. So you create something, do something with it. For example, you make a rectangle and then you extrude it. So we create something, we do something with it, and then we can do something else, like apply a texture. Now the next part is that we need to have an input. So the idea of we got these nodes, it's a node, and there's a wire connecting them. So the way Vectorworks considers this is that this is an input side, we give some information, and this is the output, what's the result. So for example, I've got an instruction here to create a rectangle. So we have to start with an input. How big is this rectangle? What size is it? And then there's an output and it creates a rectangle. So we could do something like we create a rectangle and then maybe we extrude it. So here we are. We input the size of the rectangle, Marionette creates the rectangle, then it extrudes it, and then we get an output like this one. And so that's the real basic concept. So here it is in much more in the style of Marionette. We've got the size, we've got the location, we put that input, we create a rectangle. Now in order to extrude it, we need to get the output from our rectangle. It goes into the input for the extrude. But then we need to give Marionette some height examples. So we need to tell it what the top of the extrude is and what the bottom of the extrude is, and then Marionette will make that object for us. So as we start to look, this is getting much more like we would have to do in Vectorworks. So we need to give it a rectangle object's got an orientation, a height, a width, and an origin. This is what's known as a point 2 or two-dimensional point. We've got a dimension for the width, a dimension for the height. We've got a dimension for the top, dimension for the bottom, and Vectorworks will then create the extrude with the top at where we want based on this dimension and the bottom where we want based on that dimension. So by default, the origin of a rectangle is at 0, 0 on your page. Now we do have to be careful about our inputs. So if we don't input the right kind of information, for example, if a rectangle needs a 2-point information, or if it needs a height and a width, and we give it the wrong kind of information, it will fail. Now it doesn't do loops, so you can't make a scripting language. There's no while do or for every object, that kind of thing. There's maths. We need to know about mathematics. It's easy to create a rectangle, but we need to also, maybe we need to subtract one from the other, and we can do that kind of maths as well. So to give an example, we really need to start with the end in mind, and I'm going to start with a simple object here. It's going to create a rectangle. I want it to be extruded. I need the bottom height and I need the top height, and the extrusion height will be the difference between it. So the simple object that I'll create first is this bollard. So I want to create extrude objects. So let's create the very first part. I'll just put this aside and we can bring it back if we need it. Okay, so I have one all ready to go. This one here, I think this one. So this one has my completed objects. Let's have a look. So here's one I've made earlier. So let's delete all of that and we'll start from the beginning. So we need the Marionette object. This is the Marionette object here, the Marionette tool. It's on the basic tool set. We select it and then we get to choose our objects. Now there are lots of objects. We can control attributes, we can control building information model objects like walls and doors. We can create charts, classes, data flow, and we can have conditional classes, get operators. There's a lot of things we can do. But let's have a look for, I'm going to search for rectangle. So where have we got for a rectangle? We've got one which is set a rectangle. So to adjust the height and width and origin of a rectangle, but you need to give it a rectangle to do that. This one creates a rectangle. That sounds a bit better. Okay, so click, creates a rectangle. Once we've got that in place, we can then click on the run button and it won't do anything because there's nothing there. You can see it tries to create a little something, which is a bit of a nothing. Okay, so let's go here. So we've got the object output, we've got the inputs, and we need a height and a width, and I'm not going to worry about the rotation. So back to our Marionette tool, what we need some inputs. Now I know that the input that I need is a 2D input, but if you don't know, we come down here, there's a whole lot of inputs. There's basic inputs, 2D point, vector, 3D point, and what we're looking for is a dimension. There. Okay, let's select that dimension. We click here for the width, and we click here for the height. Now, after a while, you start to find that these become a little bit crowded. You don't know what these dimensions relate to when you come back to it. So why not give it a name, and we'll call it the rectangle width. Cool. And this one's going to be my rectangle height. Now, how do I get my rectangle width and my rectangle height to connect to my rectangle? It's actually really easy. You click on the node, you get the blue handle on the end, you click, and you stick that onto the width. Now, if you want your rectangle to be a square, that is, that you want the same width to be the height as well, you can then join it to both. Now, this rectangle width has a dimension. Let's make that dimension, we're in millimeters, so let's make it 150 millimeters or 6 inches. Now, when we run, we get a 150 by 150 rectangle. So let's have a look at this again. If I grab that wire and pull it out, it disappears. So let's now add a second rectangle height. So this one is 4 inches. Now when I run that, I get a rectangle which is 4 inches by 6 inches. But if you're going to make this bollard is actually square, so I only need one of those, and it's going to be both the width and the height. So let's hope we're okay at the moment. So we've got the input, got a rectangle. What do we want to do with this? My example is we're going to extrude it. So let's go here. Let's look for extrude. What have we got? Tapered extrude, path extrude, multiple extrude, linear extrude, or just a plain extrusion. So let's create that. Now we need to know a top and a bottom. Now I can copy this, put a copy of it here and a copy there, and I'm going to change this to be top extrude and bottom extrude. So the top extrude goes to there, and the bottom extrude goes to there. So the bottom is going to be 0, and the top is going to be 150. Now I just need to connect that dot to there. Okay, let's run that, see what we get. What have we ended up with? Let's have a look. So we've ended up with an object like that, which is 150 by 150, or 6 inches by 6 inches, and it's extruded. Okay, so let's delete that. We'll select this node here. This is the top. Let's make that 24 inches. And we go, okay, and let's then create that one there. Let's run that. Okay, so now we've got one that's doing 6 inches. So by changing this size here, we can change the height of that object. Now another couple of things that we can do with a marionette group. So this is working well. It's creating a single object. Once we've created that, we can then right click on this and we can make that into a wrapper. Where's wrapper? I think we can. So a wrapper is where we join all of that stuff into one single one. But the other thing, let's run that. Run. Where's it gone? Run. Let's select all of that. Right click. So wrap. There it is there. So we can wrap that network. When we wrap it, it becomes a single object like this one down here. This series of bollards. So if you're building a large marionette group of things, what's really useful is to have a wrapper like this one here, which does a whole lot of work inside it. When I double click on this to see inside it, can we get inside? Edit the script. That's what was inside the wrapper. Now this one here actually goes through a whole lot of things. If we just have a look carefully, what happens is it creates a rectangle, creates another rectangle, creates another rectangle. And these ones here, that's the top. You notice it's square, that the wires are going both places. That's the middle, and that's the bottom. This creates 3 rectangles. It then extrudes the 3 rectangles. Extrudes these 3 here. And then it joins everything together, groups everything together, duplicates them, and then it groups them all together again. So if we run that, it's created a series of bollards that are all identical. They've got a texture on them. There, the texture was really designed to glow. It's supposed to be a light. But that's what we can do with a Vectorworks wrapper. So here's the unwrapped network here. So we start with the top size. We've got the middle size here, which is slightly different. We've got the bottom, which is the same size as the top. If we wanted to, we could get rid of one of these, and we could get it to do multiple things, because that number 150 is the same as this one here, and we could actually get rid of the middle one and get it to do some mathematics to do that work as well, so that we'd only have to put in one number. So it's just getting a little bit complicated, but the trick with Marionette is to start with the end in mind. You need to plan out your object. So let's go back to my notes. Where have they gone? Here they are. So let's go back to my notes. So what I've done, before I even got started with this thing, before I even got started with putting in the nodes and the wires, what I looked at was, what am I trying to create and what information do I need? So I need an X and a Y. I need an X and a Y here. I need an X and a Y there. And I need a Z height here. I need a Z there and a Z there. So I figured out what I needed to know first, because once I knew where I was going, I could then go and get the parts I needed to create my network. So I've actually gone through pretty much what we did just now. There's my, put in my rectangle, and then I can put in my dimension. There it is there, so put in the dimension. So these are the notes that I wrote for my users, for my subscribers to my website. So I went through how to do all of that, how to get the node, how to get all the dimensions, And a lot of this is what you and I have just done anyway. So there it is. It gives me that. Now the other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to move the location. So instead of having the insertion point here at 0, 0 to the bottom corner, I actually wanted the insertion point to be in the center, which meant that I had to figure out half of the size of the object and then move this object half of what it is. So that's what I did. So here you may not understand why I had a minus half, because there's a negative value in my network, but that's the reason for it. So then I went through and I started creating bit by bit. I started adding the extra bits that I needed. So there's my division by half. That's what that half is all about. And it figures out the divisor, and that then will then give me my position. And so what it does is it moves the origin of my object by half of its size, so that it still appears at 0, 0 at the middle of the page. So then I went through and I've got that working, and then it's really important that sometimes to debug it, there's a little bug icon here. You can click on it and it'll move along the wires and tell you which one's not working. So now I've got that. Now we're going to have a normal extrusion's got a bottom Z, an extrusion height, and a relative elevation. But Marionette does this differently. It wants to know the bottom elevation, and it wants to know the top elevation, absolute elevation of both of those. And then it will then calculate the extrusion height. So that's quite different. So I just did this sketch to help explain it. We've got a bottom Z and a height. Okay, so I've got extrusion, then I put in some information, then I get that height. So that's what I did. So now I need a second part. Now the second part is to build a small extruded rectangle to sit on top of the first part. So we're going to have individual height. So I'm going to go back to that. So this is what we're doing here. So now we've got, we want to create a second part. So let's drag a copy of that up there, drag a copy of this up here. Now, what I could do is I could drag a copy and I could input that information again here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some changes. Now, remember the insertion point for my rectangles is going to be here at the corner. Now that's going to cause me trouble later on, because it means that every time I put another rectangle on top, it's going to end up at this corner. Now I'm not going to fix that today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rectangle and I'm going to move it to, well, what do we want? We want our rectangle, we want our second rectangle, the one up here, the one on top. We want that to be 50 millimeters. So we need to take off 50 millimeters from this rectangle here to put into here. So we need a Marionette object. Is there one with mathematics in it? Let's have extrude here. We want to have some mathematics. There's some mathematics here. What sort of mathematics have we got? We've got angular conversions, basic maths, add and subtract. And there should be a subtract here somewhere as well. Subtract 1. I want to have, I've got an add. I thought there'd be a simple subtract. Or not negative. Oh, there it is, subtract. Cool. Cool, so we want to subtract that. What do we want? We want the width to come here. We want that width to go into there. Now, if you don't know the order of this, if I go and click on the description, it'll tell me it subtracts. It does subtract two numbers, A and B. Number 1 is the first number. Number 2 is the thing that's going to subtract. N is the difference. So I want this to go the width, and then I want to subtract a certain amount. So let's go and we can put in a copy of this one, and this is going to be my subtractor. It's my difference, and the difference is 50 millimeters. So let's put that one in there, and then we'll connect that one to there, and to here. So then we're going to make a copy of our extrusion. But now what we want to do is we want to have a copy of our top and a copy of our bottom. So that one goes there. So we need a top and we need a bottom, and those two. Now the top extrude. So this is the top of my first extrusion. Don't forget that I can use the top of that. Undo that. I can use the top of this extrude to be the bottom of the next one. Okay, we'll get rid of that one and then join that one to the top, and then that one goes in there. Well, let's see if that works. So, hope that's clear. Now, you can see that it's starting to get untidy here. Because I've got these wires that are crossing over things. If I put it there, maybe it's a little bit clearer to see. But I've still got all these wires going absolutely everywhere. Okay, so that's my top extrude. And it's the top extrude of the middle. And this is the top extrude of the bottom. Okay. Alright, let's see if it runs. Okay, what's happened? Cool. Alright, so not bad so far. Let's get rid of that. So this one here is the top of my middle. So let's make that 650. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but because I didn't give this the absolute elevation that I needed, I gave it 600 or 24 inches, the top and this new one were identical. Now let's run it. Now you can see that there's a difference between the two. This one here is just 50 millimeters high, this one's 600 high, and you can also see my problem now with my origin, that because the origin is both the same at the back here, this one really needs to move a bit. Now, I did go through the notes. In the notes I went through how to make that change, how to make those come together, and it goes back to here. We go back to here. What we need to have, if we go back, it's this part here. This part, this is the one we need to create the 2 point, which is the origin. So the origin is two numbers. So we've got an X and a Y coming in here, and that goes out as two numbers into my origin of my rectangle. So did I show you how to do that? So it's a divide by C. Okay, so we got an input here, and this integer is 2, so I can divide by half. So I divide that number by half, and that gives me that location. So where am I going to put that? It's got to go here somewhere. Back here. So we're going to, and we also need to change this, do we need to change that? I'll have a look. So, Marionette, what do we want? We don't want subtract this time. We want to have the divide. Where was divide? That one. Okay, so we have the divide, and we also need to have an integer input. So that's under input, basic. Where's integer? Integer. So an integer is a whole number, and so this integer needs to be 2. And let me just go back to my notes. Yeah, it goes, so that number, that integer there, what have I got? That needs to go into there. And I want plan view. I got out of plan view. That's where it went. So that number goes in there. This number here goes in there. And then then I need to have my position 1. So I need to have my input. Now, luckily I've got my notes here. I need point to the 2 point. Okay. So back to Marionette. So that's not an integer anymore. I need my maths 2 point, is it? No, my 2 point. Point 2. Point 2D, that's the one. So that goes there. And what I should then have is this one here joins to both there, and then that joins to the position at the top. Now that, if that works, what we should end up with is this rectangle should be in the center. Now if that was going to work well, I should be able to grab that node there and stick it there as well. Okay, let's run this. Run. So why didn't that work? Divide by 2, that should be the point that goes in there. That. Let's get rid of that one. And we'll run that. Okay, so there it is. So we've got one working, we've got this one working, so that's their center at 0, 0. But this one doesn't work. That one there. So let's have a look. So that's our bottom. So that worked okay. The top didn't work the way I would expected it to, because 0, 0 didn't end up. Where's 0? There's 0. Ah, this one's jumped out to the side, so I need to change the value of that. And I need to do a change up here. Change sign. So it's got to be minus sign so that it moves down. Alright, so let's go back to the Marionette. Let's find our change. And it's a maths one. And it's called change sign, I think. So we're going to change the sign from one to the other. What have we got? Change case, change, don't. Not that one then. I'm going to cheat and go back to my notes because I actually covered it here. Divide by that. Divide by point. Got my extrusion. 0.2D. And I know I've got one that works, so I'm just going to use the one that works. Down there. So what have we got? We've got getting more complicated here. We're adding one to the other. Oh, that's a great trick. Instead of putting in the exact height, using add, so that I take this dim value from the top of this one and add it to whatever my additional dimension is, and then that dimension then becomes the bottom of the next part. Now somewhere I haven't covered, I've glossed over the idea that you need to change the sign somewhere. So we've got that. So what I've done now is I've got 3 rectangles that work together, and I run the script. So let's go back and have a look at the script. Now I do have a script that works. And let's get rid of all of that. Delete it. Delete that object. Delete that object. So here's a script that does actually work. And you can see what we've got here is I've got my dimension. So 2, that's my top. It's my top component, so 150 millimeters. I divide 150 by 2, that gives me 75. I then make those negative. They go into here, so it becomes, my origin is half. This makes it half. It's half of this size here is now my origin, so my origin should be at 0, 0. And you can see I've actually spread this out, and I've also duplicated things here so that I've got the bottom, I've got the middle, I've got the top. That gives me the flexibility. I can change those shapes if I need them, or change those sizes. I create rectangles out of those. I could, in this case, create a circle instead of a rectangle. Now, it's not easy for me to swap, I don't think. Class, layer, plain screen. So I can't, I don't want to edit the script. So I didn't cover this, but what is each of these nodes doing? Because actually what happens is each of these nodes is a standalone script. So it's a Vectorworks, it's a Python script, and when we open it to have a look at it, you can see there's all the programming behind it all. So the beauty of the Marionette is that you can visually join all the scripting together to make an object. Now this is just a simple object, and you might think this is looking very complicated, and the idea is that you do have to look at your object and break it down into the most simple chunks so that you can then work on it. So how's that looking? So let's go back through this. So let's trace one of these. So we got the bottom height, this is the bottom size, there's our number 2, so it divides by 2. That gives us our location. We make those negative, and it's a 2D point, and that sets the origin of this rectangle. It's a rectangle which is square, so the input for the width and the height is identical, and from that we get a bottom extrusion. Now we use the start height, which is 0, probably. We've got the bottom extrusion, which is 650 at the moment, and that feeds into the bottom of the top of this extrusion. It also feeds into the bottom of this one, and then we add the middle extrusion height to it to give us the top. I then wanted to add a texture to this, so that I then extrude the object, I add a texture, and then I group everything together. And grouping it all together then makes it into a object that I can then start to play with. Now this particular object, once I've grouped the 3 parts to my bollard, I'm then going to duplicate those objects. How many do I want? Here's my number of copies. I've got 1 at the moment. So this then says, okay, you got 1 copy, we're going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to make a number of copies of that, and I duplicate that, and I move them, and so it moves a whole bunch of them. So I've ended up with a whole group of things. So let's run this script. So let's run my Marionette script. There's an error in there. There's an error in one of these texture things. I think what I had to do was to delete this and then just put a new texture in. So let's get rid of that middle texture. We're going to find texture. Texture. So where's texture? So texture, there's a few things in there for texture. Where's textures? There, texture, and it was apply texture, and I think it's this one here, this texture one I used. That looks like it. So I then go back to my selection tool, select this one, that joins into there, and this one joins into there. And then in this texture, I've got to make sure I choose my texture. Glass. Let's run it again, see if we still get the error. Cool, no error. And there's an object, and it should have glass in the middle. There it is, there's my glass in the middle. So I've got beach, and glass in the middle, or wood. And so now, what if I change number of copies to 10? Cool, and I change the total distance to 2 meters. I'll change that to 5. I should get, what's that distance? 2 meters. Let's make it 5. I should get 5 in 2 meters. So let's get rid of that, and let's run this again. So there we are. I've gotten 5 every 2 meters, which I think is pretty cool. Sweet. Okay, so that's, to me, that's a good example of how you do it. Now, someone asked me if I could cover parametric objects. I'm more than happy to do that, but have a look. You've got to make sure that you break down the object into simple chunks so that you can work on them. That's a simple object, and that's the script that I use. Now, I did also, in that manual, I went through how to create a cabinet. So I went through how to create this cabinet. Now, we don't need it because Vectorworks have got the cabinet tool, but it was just this object here, and it's a Marionette object, and I've used the conversion into showing the object instead of the script, because once you've made it, you can make it into a script. So I can make the depth, I can change the height, and everything is now scriptable or programmable in this, and so it just makes these kinds of objects for me. If I want to edit the script, I can open the script, and there's what I use to create it. And you can see it looks like spaghetti with wires going all over the place. But they were designed to do specific things. So it creates a top, a back, a right, a left, the carcass bottom, the kick. And so it just creates this nice sort of script, and there it is. Now it's missing the 2D component. I should really have added that to the script. But as I said, we don't need this anymore because Vectorworks has its own built-in cabinetry, but this was just an example. And it was covered in the notes. So if you came to watch, thank you very much. I'm sorry about the lack of live chat. I don't know why I disabled it, and I couldn't enable it for the start. So I'm really sorry about that. But if you came, thanks for watching, and I really appreciate your time.